Hi everyone. It's that time of the day again, that time of a Friday where we're moving into coffee and chat. But today it's so hot. I'm afraid it's not a coffee. It's a very cold liquid. And I'm a tad worried because this was made by a friend, and it started to go very weird at the top. So it looks as though I'm drinking alcohol. I'm not. I promise. It's elderflower. Great to see you all today. It's one of those days where I think people are coming to the end of the week and starting to go, oh, Glastonbury tomorrow, so lots of things to do this weekend. We've got some amazing people with us. You won't be looking at them the same order as I am, but to my left, probably not to yours, David Johnston, who is our local MP in Wantage. We like to say Wantage and Didcot, but formerly Wantage. Who is a new MP into the area, was voted into Parliament in 2019, a refreshing MP, and has some interesting ideas that I know he's very keen to push forward. And Sally to my right, but probably not to yours, which is very confusing, who has just won one of the 50 top women in engineering, the international awards. It's a very confusing title. She's going to put me right, I'm sure. And has been a close friend of mine for some time. And we work together on trying to improve environmental conditions within the county that we live in. And Sally has been instrumental in helping us as a business work towards our ISO 14001, the environmental awards that we work on. So really welcome to both of you. So my first question and in our chat is slightly different to some of the ones that we've talked about previously, but it's about transferable skills. And I know, Sally, that you've gone from a science degree into mental health nursing, into environmental work that you've been doing more recently, working with electrification of cars, the white fleet, etc. You've been doing, including Meghan Markle's amazing car that Prince Harry drove away from their wedding in. You've done a huge amount, and now we're running this amazing business in East Hendred, just down the road from us, that is very much looking to support environmental conditions. Can you just tell, we talked about it previously, but what's the loop as far as you're concerned with regards to transferable skills and how you've made that journey?
So I think it's two things. I think it's STEM and passion. So I was always interested in science at school and sort of excelled in biology, and I'm really bad at physics, but excelled in biology and a little bit of chemistry. And sort of, when I was younger, engineering wasn't a woman's thing. So I grew up in a household. My dad ran his own business. He's a carpenter, but a highly skilled heritage one. Was brought up around people who made and did and designed and came up with solutions. And I liked tinkering with cars and bits and fixing stuff and cutting heads off Barbies and all sorts of random things as a child. And sort of, so for me, naturally going through that traditional path, which, it was when I was at school, there wasn't these BTECs and MVQs and all these great things, was, GCSEs, A levels, university, like degree, and I was fortunate enough to do it when there was no, awful tuition fees and stuff like that. And it was a fantastic experience. But when I left my degree, I was just like, what do I do with this? What do you do with it? What do you do next? And it's kind of like, do you stay on? Do you just keep, that perpetual education thing? And I enjoyed neurosciences and I did stuff about dementia and things like that. And I kind of thought I was really interested in the brain, the functionality of the brain and things. So then went and did one of these rapid courses to become a nurse and did mental health and learning disabilities and loved it and got really involved with the Royal College of Nursing as a sort of a union rep, and then actually got elected as the president for the students for the Royal College of Nursing. And then I realised how awful being a nurse was in the real world. I went to lots of tribunals and had to stand up for people, and just probably had a 30-year career in like 2 years. But my passion for stuff, it's awful, but my passion for stuff and building stuff and solving problems was always there, and sort of sideline interest in Dakar rallies and big beefy machines that could do anything, and always like a good tractor, so it's kind of
who doesn't like a good tractor?
Everyone loves a good tractor, but it kind of went from there, and it's kind of and then into engineering more and more, and I started to design products. I'm a big sort of Land Rover fan, and sort of designed things for my own Land Rover and heavy duty suspension and stuff for race cars. And then it just sort of, eventually I fell into that industry, but I fell into it because of passion. But the reality is, what it teaches you, you know, what you get taught when you're, you know, at university, about managing a project, managing your time. Yeah, I've done my prints and all those sorts of things, is, you know, all those skills are transferable. You know, if you can research, if you're passionate, you know, if you can document, if you can critique yourself, you know, all those things. It doesn't matter where your niche is, but if you love what you do, then obviously you can do anything. So yeah, I've done loads of random things over the years, but yeah.
Yeah, what do you feel? Because I mean, how? So it sounds to me as if you sort of fell into university. I did. I fell into university. It was sort of assumed in my family. You know, nice middle
Yeah.
class family, both parents teachers. It was obvious I was going to go to school. Did you just sorry, to university? Did you just fall into university and then the rest was a progression, a natural progression, all
Yeah, I mean,
always about wanting to talk about how things work?
I mean, looking back now, you know, and I, when I go and do STEM talks and stuff, I always say to kids, you know, honestly, don't worry about university. Like, if the range of options and apprenticeships and, you know, amazing companies who will take on young people from further education was around when I was taking that progression leap, and if the career service was better, and it was just tick box, wasn't it? It was just, oh,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
UCAS forms arrived, you know, some point during your sort of final year of A levels, and it's like, oh yeah, I need that many points to go there. Oh, I'll tick that box and send that in, and that was the driver at sixth form, was like, that's what you were supposed to do. Whereas now,
yeah,
having, you know, as you know, I've got a son who's unfortunately COVID GCSE year, but looking at the options for him in FE for 16 to 18, then 18 plus, I mean, it's vast. And in
yeah,
engineering, there's, especially around here, there's huge amounts of opportunity. So yeah, it was just
yeah.
I didn't really enjoy it. It was just a tick box exercise.
Yeah,
Um, you know,
because I know, David, you've done a lot of work, you know, working with people who are, you know, trying to make those decisions about whether they go into university or whether they do something completely different. You know, is that what you were seeing in your early career? Because I mean, you know, you've had this really strange career, again, the CEO of a bit major of a charity, and then moving into Parliament. That did you find, when you for yourself it was transferable skills, but also those that you were talking to? And for you, was it just well, it's an automatic, you know, I've got a place in a great university, so I'm obviously going to go?
No, because my mum had left school at 16 and my dad at 14, so it wasn't a tradition in my family at all. Um, so I don't know where the driver came from really, but I really liked certain subjects, and I just wanted to keep pursuing them. And it seemed, definitely at that time, it seemed like if you had been to a school like I had, 20% GCSE pass rate, that going to university would really help you in the employment market. Now, in recent years, it hasn't helped you as much because, well, for various reasons, but it hasn't helped you as much. And then, of course, I did quite a bit of work with employers about the transferable skills that they were looking for. And give or take, unless you were doing something very vocational, give or take, what you needed was the same skills in each place. You know, that most sorts of businesses wanted you to be able to interact in a certain way, write in a certain way, think in a certain way, and so on. And you could move sector to sector quite easily. Now, if you're doing engineering, as Sally, and congratulations to her, top 50 women in engineering. If you're doing something like that, it's not so simple. I couldn't have, with my history and politics degree, become an engineer. But in general, it was pretty transferable. Going from being charity CEO to MP is definitely partly transferable. I mean, you in some ways you have less direct authority, I suppose, in some ways, because, you know, if you're CEO of something, you make the decisions, you have the organization in your kind of guidance and control. Whereas when you become an MP, actually powers are usually either the government's powers, and if you're not a member of that, you don't have that, or they're at the council level and the county council level. So your biggest power, which I suppose is transferable from my charity world to now, is your ability to persuade. You know, it's your ability to be able to influence and get people to do things, even if you don't have direct authority over them to do so.
Me talking without my mute on. I've got next door a building, you know, wouldn't you just know it? It's been silent for the last couple of months, but you know, because COVID is, because the restrictions are being lifted, they've suddenly started building again. So every time I get on a phone, there's behind me. But what you've just talked about, I think, is in part what Sally was talking about with regards to passion and sell, because you know, passion about a subject area, you still need to sell that subject area. And you know, the sell on electrification of vehicles has not been an easy sale for the last few years. I don't know what you think, Sal, but it's, you know, despite the fact that capability has been there and you've made, you know, you've been involved in some amazing projects, it's been a far harder sell than maybe, you know, for lots of different reasons, I'm sure, but you know, far harder sell than maybe we would have expected. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, the first electrification project I was involved with was 9 years ago, and the batteries definitely looked a lot different to what they're looking like now. But it is one of those very interesting kind of areas where it's so electrification has been around since 1832. Okay, so it is not new. Nothing about this is new. What went wrong back then, which is kind of what is going wrong now, is there wasn't the infrastructure, and then someone came along with something a little bit cheaper and everyone jumped on that bandwagon. Okay, it's repetitive of history in any innovation. Okay, the difference now with electrification is obviously we've got some huge climate issues. We've got a race against time going on. We've got massive emission issues, and that equates to health and mobility issues. So the drivers now is, once you've got the sort of public, you know, as Dave was saying, once you've persuaded the public that it's not a bad thing, you know, it's not gonna blow up or electrify you if it gets wet, or you know, you're going to be able to charge it up, and you don't have to put AA batteries in. There's a really great Mercedes advert actually on YouTube where I can't remember her name, she's a famous comedian, but she does a Mercedes advert, and literally she opens the door and these thousands of AA batteries fall out. She's like, oh, an electric car. And the thing is, it's not that far from the truth. I did have a battery pack here earlier, actually, I could have shown you. But it's kind of, you know, it's not rocket science. Okay, it's harder in many ways.
Everybody says that in Oxfordshire, and then they have to think about whether it actually is rocket science.
No, it's not. It's, you know, it's like everything. Everything is a process. So everything has, you know, fit, form, and function, and there's a process to what you do. The difference now is what they call sort of the perfect storm. So once you get that public acceptance, which obviously, you know, David's now in that world of, you know, public opinion, public acceptance. You know, how do you move that force of, okay, everyone's on board, quick, you know, to then match the technology, the manufacturing, and then the need and demand. But then also, where we could go wrong is, this is not about direct replacing car for car or bus for bus or whatever it is, because we have to look at the way we move. We have to look at the future of mobility. And for me, electrification is a stopgap. It's not the be on all end all solution, because if you look at the whole total life cycle of battery and cell creation against the whole total life cycle of building an ICE, an internal combustion engine vehicle, electric vehicles don't look that pretty. They only look pretty when you take the key. So there's a lot of work still to be done. And you know, the other day, there's this big, obviously, UKRI, which you know about because of Harwell, you know, the UK's Research and Innovation Council. They've just put out all their roadmaps now about you know, the road to electrification, but also, especially given the current economy stuff, you know, the business opportunities. But I'm afraid I am quite a big hydrogen flag waver. So there's a few things I can't talk about, but there's a lot of really interesting things going on in our area, like in Oxfordshire. Oxfordshire is amazing. That's why I live here. But it's kind of, yeah, so I think, yeah, electrification, it's not new. It was before, you know, the internal combustion engine. It's come back around again. The technology hasn't changed massively. It's more the computers and then autonomy and clever things. But we still have to think about how we move, why we move, where we're going, you know, and how we utilize transport, you know, for the future. What is the future of mobility? How do we move people around? But number one is you have to persuade people it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, so little bit unfair, David, because I'm not sure how familiar you are with where we are in this space, but the communication piece. I mean, we've got this wonderful opportunity coming out of an awful thing called a pandemic to change the way that we move around the county, and which is why we're talking about cycling next week. But is there more that we can do in this space in order to communicate the value of some of the things that Sally said? I mean, I agree with her that the whole life cycle is a problem, and we really need to consider that. But is there more that we can do in that space, do you think?
Yeah, I definitely do. And I think, the government is thinking very hard about this, because actually, although there are critics of what the government has done, it's actually moved further and faster than most governments that you can point to in this area. And it is one of the few governments now to talk about, let's have a green recovery as a result of, the post-COVID period. And there aren't that many governments talking about that. And I know that at the moment there's a lot of thinking going on about that. How do you incentivize people to want to have an electric car? Because one of the issues at the moment is cost. And I think across all the measures regarding the environment, like a lot of other issues, actually, we have to not be judgmental when we are encouraging people to do things. I always liken this to organic food. Organic food comes along, and then if you're a certain way up the income scale, you say, right, everybody should be eating organic food. Yeah, but if it's 3 times the cost, not everybody can afford to do that. And I feel that very much with electric cars. We've got to find a way of incentivizing people to do it. We've got to upgrade the infrastructure network for it, so that wherever you are, you can charge it. But people need to understand it's affordable for them, not feel they're being judged for the decisions they've made, and see the benefits. And those benefits are, yes, to our environment, to the air quality, and so on. They might be to your health, but they might also be financial. Changing topic slightly, an energy company came to see me recently that's been doing a pilot where it knocks on your door and says, hey, we're in the area. What about us swapping your bulbs for LED bulbs? Because, by the way, they'd last a lot longer, it cost you less in energy. And that sort of thing, where you're gently encouraging people, saying, rather than saying it's really awful that you've got a petrol car at the moment, I think is the way to go. And I think the government is thinking a lot about this. And I know cycling is next week, but you'll know there's a 2 billion investment going into cycling and walking. Lots of people have been sending me their ideas for cycle routes, which I've been passing on to the county council. So I think there is a lot more we can do, and I'm expecting actually the government to announce a number of things on this in the coming months.
Again, they keep going drill, so I keep switching off. So Sal, that obviously links really, nicely, quite bizarrely, into what you've been doing with regards to environmental, because the Hive and the whole collective work that you've been doing with local businesses works in exactly the same way. You've had to do a lot of communication to persuade people that this is important. I mean, that came at a perfect storm time. The Blue Planet, I don't think if the Blue Planet film had been shown, David Attenborough's Blue Planet film with that whale and the mummy, the baby next to the mother whale dead, I don't think it would have had the same impact. And then followed up by all of the work that was done on waste and rubbish over several months, if not years, has made a real difference to how people see the whole environmental question, rightly or wrongly. That was, I think, for me, a seminal moment. I don't know if you think the same.
Oh, it's a tough one, isn't it? So obviously there's been a huge number of campaigners and sustainability groups for decades, banging on the door, and even within David's constituency, every major town's got a sustainability group, and a group, really doing the groundwork. And the groundwork is what really, really matters. Let's not joke about it. We have the ability to make change now, today, that will actually have impact, tomorrow, rather than, David's in that world of big policy making, and then 10, 15, 20 years time something might happen. And that was the reason behind moving into doing something in my spare time, because obviously I still have my day job, is because looking at the impact of the technologies that we are creating, or especially the projects I've been involved with, and that life cycle analysis, and thinking about what is the bigger picture and when does it actually have an impact on the environment. Well, I won't see that impact in my lifetime, and my children might see it in their lifetime. And as David alluded to, yes, we have a government that's looking at a Green Deal, but equally there was a vote, not so long ago, where they voted to not speed up reducing emissions. So the key is not about the key is about educating and getting people to understand. So the key is not about more cars, the key is not about more buses, more trains, any of that stuff. We have an infrastructure, and a pretty good one, in the UK, because obviously, decades of investment in public infrastructure. We need to make sure that it's utilised effectively, and obviously now very safely, but that we encourage other ways of working. So, it's like Harwell's a fantastic place, isn't it? Because it's kind of like, you've got lots of people all coming from a very similar area. How could we get to the point that we can encourage them to share transport, or share car ownership, or lease, or or sort of mobility as a service and stuff like that, transport as a service, more than just private singular ownership. When I was a teenager, it was probably sort of the same when when David grew up. It was like that countdown to your driving license, that countdown to your first car. If you talk to young people now, that's not an objective. They do think a lot more about what would be the impact. And I mean, for example, I've just upgraded my bicycle to an electric bicycle, because the idea of going up the hill to Harwell would kill me. There would have to be a mobile defibrillator unit at the top of the hill. Now I can breeze up the hill and then come down looking like I'm really speedy. But it's about that education piece. So what happened with the Hive was, I was looking at all this and going, yeah, this is great. Creating new vehicles, creating new ideas, converting older vehicles to electric, great, still brilliant. But when's the payback? It's a bit like, when you put solar on your roof, what's the payback? When do I start to see something for my money? And it's a long way off. Whereas home air pollution, for example, causes more childhood asthma than it did at a point to outdoors. So how can we change where we live inside and outside? And simple things like changing from a really nasty high chemical bleach, not plugging in those horrible artificial air fresheners and stuff like that, make a massive difference to people's homes. So I detoxed my own life and realized that I am probably due some sort of criminal record for stealing multiple small toiletries from hotels, because they were just breeding. I don't know where they came from, boxes full of them. And Mr. Sheen, that seemed to appear on multiple levels. Detoxing my home, going for a more green alternative, looking at the options. And as David rightly says, there was a point where green and eco and organic was just seen as like a middle class, yuppie, kind of yummy mummy type of thing. All this stuff is affordable. Refilling is cheaper and better for you and longer lasting. And we've got some great companies based in Oxfordshire that manufacture and run, sustainable sort of bulk refills and stuff, like Ceci in North Oxford. So yeah, the Hive came about from, I want localization. I want to identify these amazing local makers, traders, people that are doing things that benefit the environment, or you're not buying some tat off eBay or middle aisle in Aldi. You're actually buying something where that is having a direct impact on that person's life, family, and livelihood. So that's where the Hive evolved from markets, as you know, and then it evolved into me buying large containers of detergents and persuading friends to buy some because there was loads of it in my house. And then it's grown to having the hubs. The great thing about the hubs, I've got one at Ardington and one now out at Queenford Lakes, is that's bringing a new type of customer into an existing business. So working with the grocer chef, obviously, especially during COVID, tea rooms, very, very popular. Shop, didn't do as much, it was just the basics. Then we bring a new type of customer, comes in, then they'll hang around and have some food, and it all, everything is sort of, circular. So that circular economy approach of looking who, when, where, and how, and influencing.
But you did do huge amounts of comms. So I mean, the comms was also there. So yes, it was the right time, but the comms was there. You put that out there. I mean, the whole business of small business, I know, is something you spent last weekend, focused on, David. That whole, let's look at what small businesses are doing, particularly in our area. How they're actually paying back into the economy. I didn't hear too much about how that went, but presumably it was a very busy weekend because there are a lot of small businesses around here.
Yeah, it was slightly mischaracterized in the local paper as me saying I was going to visit every local business in the constituency, which I would, which I'd love to do, but I'm not able to do that in just a couple of days, unfortunately. So maybe by the time of the next election, I might have managed that. But obviously, one of the great things is there are so many. I mean, I think, look, what Sally's talked about a lot of important things, including the home. I mean, one thing we haven't talked about is retrofitting homes and buildings generally, because so much of emissions come through that. She's quite right to talk about all the great stuff that's going on at Harwell, and particularly actually this new Natural History Museum site that's going to be there is designed to bring a load of their specimens. They've got 80 million specimens, bring about 40% of them to Harwell and work on the solutions to the problems we're facing, like climate change. But last week, going back to this community point, and Sally's been doing some great work, and I think it's absolutely right we look at what communities can do. Last week, I think it was, I was one of the co-sponsors of my colleagues Peter Aldis's local electricity bill. It's called a 10-minute rule bill, where you raise an important issue. And in sum, what that does, or tries to do, is to say that where people are now generating electricity themselves in their own communities, they should be able to sell it, and then we might be able to get to a position where a local community is generating the electricity it uses and sells itself. And that sort of thing could be really powerful. Now, the problem at the moment is there are huge setup costs involved. I mean, millions of pounds are basically keeping you out of the network, and that's what that bill is about. The point is, I think Sally's quite right to think about and to be actively working on what local communities can do themselves.
I guess for, Sally's Hive is far bigger than just, the whole eco thing. So, there's some amazing jewelers, there's a fabulous honey maker, there's bakers, that, there's lots and lots of different types of business, aren't there, Sal? It's, it's far more, it's far more small businesses in the craft and artisan area than in a lot of areas. I don't know if you want to expand on your new thinking, where you are with regards to the new thinking that you've broached on this week.
Yeah, so the idea was to get people thinking about collective community. So, something good has to come out of the last 3 to 4 months. Especially in our area, obviously, because that's the only one I can talk about, because that's where I live, is there's been lots of goodwill, and there's been lots of amazing community spirit. It sort of took me back to sort of hanging out with my grandma when I was about 6 or 7, communities coming together and keeping people fed, watered, looking after the elders in our society and those that are the most vulnerable. And that should be massively praised. But the last 4 weeks, that has rapidly disappeared. So you've got lots of people that invested in diversifying their businesses, because a lot of people fell through the net from the government funding stuff, especially very small independents in artisans and crafters and things like that. And yeah, so the hive has always been part of a collective. If you think about a hive, a beehive, it's the sum of all of its parts. Okay, so it's kind of, it can't function without all of its different bees doing different jobs. So we try and embrace all the entrepreneurs, makers. You say we've got jams, preserves, honey. We bring in the bakery on a Saturday from Marco Polo in Wantage, which, David, if you haven't been there, I warn you now, you will need to loosen your belt. There is lots of very nice things to eat.
I've had to loosen my belt a lot already, Sally, this period.
Yeah, South Oxfordshire is tough. South Oxfordshire is full of very tempting things. Chocolate, we have obviously Florist from Harwell, and all these people. I was listening to people's stories at the very beginning. So when we were sitting there cancelling markets and chatting to people, and people were like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I don't have the money to invest in online infrastructure. I've got to juggle my children at home. My partner's still got to work full time, or they're a key worker. How do I continue my passion, my independent business that I love, and not lose that? So we became sort of a one-stop shop and a pickup hub. So we also work with Tribe from Farringdon, who do the dry foods, and you can order from her, and we're a pickup point. So again, try and minimize people moving around, try and embrace local communities, and effectively be a collective community. And that is about us being kind to each other, walking and cycling, reducing our emissions, shopping locally, shopping artisan, shopping independent. And David stood up the other day in Parliament and sort of, gave a good flag wave for the independents in our constituency, of which there are loads. So I'm pleased to announce in the next 2 weeks, we're going to launch a thing called Local Ista, which sounds a bit like some sort of mafioso thing, but basically we work with an amazing company called 42, who are based at Harwell, who Rob's a neighbour of mine, and when we sit sort of zooming over ideas with each other, but basically a site which will promote all the local independents in our constituency, which hopefully, David, once we've managed to figure out, it's all beyond me, this web stuff, I can type things in, but they're the clever people. But give everyone a platform to talk about what they do and encourage. So I had a heartbreaking email from a honey maker who rescues honeys, rescues bees quite actively from bees from all these development sites to obviously keep the bee populations going, which we really also need in South Oxfordshire because the amount of pollination for all of our agriculture as well. And he was in high demand, and literally in the last 4 weeks he's not had a single sale, and as a result he's now considering what does he actually do. That's
really sad, isn't it?
And so, it's not the only story.
But that sounds absolutely brilliant. I mean, that you're getting that off the ground. Guys, as always, we're running out of time, but it is coming up to past. I always promise that we're only going to do this for 30 minutes. I've missed out on quite a few questions that have come in, mainly because quite a few questions did come in and you guys were giving us quite a lot of good information. So I didn't want to pause you. Really grateful for your time. Sally, you are absolutely brilliant. I can't believe that we had somebody in Oxfordshire in the top 50. Well done. It's absolutely superb. I'm very proud of you. And, I asked David along in order to make sure that he was aware that we had somebody in the top 50. I knew he knew already, but, great that you did it. Really good news. And it's not for the things that, I know you for, which is really quite bizarre. It's for other things. Really, really impressed. Thank you so much for your time. David, thank you for your time as well. Guys, next week we are moving, as I've already said, into the cycling piece. So it's an extension of what we've been talking about today. We have two speakers, Councillor Christina Bartlington, who is the Cycle Supremo, always sounds a bit weird, for Oxfordshire. So again, in my home county, plus one of my core members of staff, who is a big cyclist. He cycled for the British Army, so he's very keen as a sports cyclist. But we want to bring it back to what businesses can do and how businesses can make some improvement, building on from some of the things that David and Sally have talked about today with regards to, are there different ways of moving around the county and, moving around the country and indeed the world that we can maybe explore out of this pandemic that we've been in at the moment. Guys, really grateful for your time. Thank you, everybody. I've run out of a drink. That means obviously we've run out of time. Thank you so much and speak to you soon. Take care.
Thanks. Cheers. Bye.